So tonight's live is Let's Talk Mental Health with Jamie, and we are going to discuss toxic positivity. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, and then we'll get started. If you want to participate in the conversation, you can do that in the chat or request to come up on the panel, however y'all want to do it. Hi, my name is Jamie. I am every Sunday night. We get together at 4:30 p.m. Arizona time, and we discuss mental health and mental health topics. Tonight's topic is going to be toxic positivity. Hey, Vet's Inner Voice. So we're going to go through a couple of things. Let me see if I can move my face out of the way here. I guess not, but okay. So pretty much, maybe I'll change this because this is going to be maybe I'll turn off the dual cameras because I think it's just going to be a pain in the ass, but oh well. Okay, so disclaimer, I am not a practicing therapist anymore. I have the education. We'll go over that in a minute, but this is an opinion-based discussion, and it is not to be substituted for therapy. Okay, so that's a disclaimer that I just say so that everybody is very clear that I am no longer a practicing therapist, and so everything we talk is opinions or based on my experiences. I have a bachelor's of psychology. I got my bachelor's in psychology from Grand Canyon University in 2015. I have an MS of Christian counseling of substance abuse and addictive disorders, which I got in 2018. I did my internship at Arizona State Prison. Lord have mercy, what just happened? I did my internship at Arizona State Prison, and I did a few post-grad studies at a master's and doctoral level in forensic psychology, but I did not complete those things. So that's a little bit about me, and we are going to go ahead and get into tonight's discussion, which is going to be the toxic positivity. So tonight we have on Selena. She is another creator here on TikTok. She does a lot of beauty content, but she also does beauty content mixed with mental health content. Then we have Vet's Inner Voice, and he is also another content creator here on TikTok. He does a lot of information on veterans resources. So if you guys need information about any of those things, please go give him a follow. If you guys want to hear somebody who talks about relatable mental health issues, go give Selena a follow. We all pretty much do that. But you are in good company. This is a judgment-free zone. Everything you say here, we are not going to judge you, I promise. And if anybody gets judgy in the comments, they get a nice fat block. All right. So if I Stay Positive has ever made you feel worse, this is a live that is probably for you. Toxic positivity is a term that we hear a lot about, and it is something that I feel like is becoming more and more common. And I don't know if it's always been here or if it's just something that I recently started to notice, but it does seem like it's becoming a topic of conversation more often. And toxic positivity is the pressure to be positive no matter what. And this can dismiss real emotions, and it can also make you feel like you're getting blocked from any kind of support. And why it matters to identify toxic positivity is because when you're experiencing it on the receiving end, it can cause you to feel invalidated. It can increase you feeling shame. It can increase self-isolation because shit, I don't want to share with anybody if they're just going to give me the silver lining all the time. Sometimes you just need to vent, and you need someone to hear you in that moment and be present. Slow down. How often have you heard just be positive? If you've heard it a lot, you're going to put an A in the chat. If you've heard it sometimes, you're going to put a B in the chat. And if you hear it rarely, you're going to put a C in the chat. Okay, no worries about pinning comments. Just screenshot them for me. A. Okay, I think a lot of us hear A. I Heart Yellow Cake says they hear it rarely. Okay, all right. In 1 minute... And this is anybody in the chat or anybody on the panel. You can unmute yourself for this if you want. In 1 minute, share a moment when positivity backfired for you and what made it harmful to you. If anybody wants to share that, drop it in the chat or unmute yourself.
I think that for me, like toxic positivity in general, it's so easy to become complacent, right? I've had times where my friends will tell me like, "Oh, you're doing XYZ really well," or "You're doing like, man, you look really good," or like, "You look like you're doing good in the gym," whatever. And then you want to take that moment to like, take that and onboard it. I'm doing what I need to do. I can go rest now, right? I can relax now because somebody is, hyping me up where I'm at, or telling me like, hey, it's going to be okay. Like, no, it might not be. Like, I might need to go do something about it. There's been so many times where I've had somebody say, it'll work out. Not unless I go do it.
Right. Right. Selena, anything you want to touch on with that?
It honestly just reminded me of this time when I was in a really, really deep, like really bad depression, and it was the first time I ever really experienced it. And I was sitting in my house with all the lights off in the dark by myself, and a friend of mine texted me and she wanted to go do something. And I told her I was busy, and she showed up anyway. Like, she was trying to gas me up. She was like, let's go, it'll be so good for you. And I told her, like, you don't understand. I physically cannot leave. I can't get off this couch. I can't turn a light on. I can't function. And so she got really angry with me and said that her hands were tied. She stopped being my friend because I was too depressed to get off my couch. And months later she did try to reconnect with me, but my barrier was permanently up at that point. She'd already, hurt me. So, there's times where people think they're helping by being extra positive, and honestly, like, that's just not what we need in that moment.
Right. And I think while it's fair to say that we want to try to find the positive in something, it's not always appropriate in every situation, or sometimes I don't know. I know that like my experience has been sometimes people jump right to positivity. Even I do that to myself. And it's like sometimes in that moment, I just need to feel angry or frustration. And just a random said, positivity isn't always needed. I would say that I could agree with that. All right. So
Feels good to be mad sometimes.
it really does. And I think we have to experience all of our emotions, even anger and frustration, because the best way to work through them and process them is, sorry, my dog's doing something, is to feel those emotions in the moment. So we are going to switch. I have cool backgrounds I made. So, some ways that we can spot the signs of basically these are I call them micro invalidations. And there are some ways that we can spot the signs. So, platitudes over presence. And that would be things like, it could be worse. They're starving people in China, Kim, or whatever. Everything happens for a reason. I think those are some platitudes. And if you guys have examples, drop them in the chat.
I do that to myself.
That other
Like,
veteran
when
has
I'm
it worse.
complaining about something so small, it's like, honestly, do you really have it that bad? I invalidate my own feelings. It is so toxic and so unhealthy, but I acknowledge that I at least acknowledge that I do it, and I'm trying to work on it. I just don't know how to.
I think we all do it. I think we've kind of been indoctrinated to do that in some ways. And I think you said I'm not as bad as that other vet. I think that's really common in a lot of communities. So in the military community, but also in the mental health community, there's some people that are like, well, I know other people have it worse or whatever.
It was really easy for me my whole time in to kind of get stuck in that, because just due to the nature of my work, I was, in an office supporting dudes that were on the ground right now. So when I see these dudes, I go, oh, well, their life sucks so much worse because look what just happened to them. And now I get to go home
Right.
and my family asks, how's my day going? What did you do at work today? Well, I watched four of my friends end up a story that won't ever get told because classification, whatever. Man, that just completely off topic. I'm sorry. I'm going to mute myself
okay,
now
no
so I don't
worries.
ramble too much.
No worries. But I think platitudes and like Selena said, I think we do have a tendency to do that to ourselves. Now, before I move on, I want to address some of the comments in the chat. So one of the comments is positivity can cause the exact opposite in others when it's not needed. I think so too. I think too much positivity can actually make you feel more frustrated, irritated, or pissed off. And then opposite as an upset. Same. It's hard to accept your feelings if they have always only been invalidated. And then the one time you're forced to feel them, it can hurt really bad. I think those are all pretty fair. So I think gratitude gaslighting is the next one. So being grateful, and you actually already said this one, others have it worse. And then there is speed bypassing, where we jump to solutions before validating the pain. And I know I'm actually guilty of doing this. And my kids have actually been open with me enough to say, Mom, sometimes I just want to be heard. So sometimes I'll be like, well, how about we do this? And they'll be like, Mom, why don't you shut up and listen? They don't say it like that, but where it's like, I just need to be heard in this moment. And then the next one is tone policing. Oh my God, I know I've heard this too much and I hate this. In fact, when people do it to me, I usually intensify my resting bitch face. You're too negative, smile more. That is the quickest way to get one of these. Because sometimes you don't know what somebody's going through and they've already been smiling through whatever bullshit they're going through. And you coming along telling them smile more is kind of like, oh, fuck off. Sometimes that's not the way to hear it. Now, I do think that you could say that in an appropriate setting, but if somebody is just doing their job, even, you shouldn't be going, oh, you should smile more or some shit like that. So, hi, welcome in, Megan. Welcome in, Connie.
If you're at work, no, never. Don't say that to people. That's weird.
Right.
Don't.
Right. And I think if you're at work and you're just like, I remember waitressing and stuff, and people will be like, you should smile more. And it's like, I'm just trying to get through my shift without fucking anything up. So I think that.
Dude, I am hot. Everything hurts. My feet hurt. No.
Right. It's like, oh, piss off. So, all right. So the next one is for people who are out there listening quietly. I have another poll question. You can just put an A, B, C, or D in the chat. What phrase stings the most? What phrase stings the most? Look on the bright side, which is A. B is good vibes only. C is others have it worse. D is you're being dramatic. Which phrase stings the most? D. Okay, you're being dramatic. I fucking hate that one too, because sometimes I am being dramatic because in that moment I feel a lot of emotions about whatever's going on. So
we're all dramatic about different things to different degrees. I try not to project my emotional response onto other people. I shouldn't expect them to take things a certain way.
Right.
Man, I'm hard on myself and I'm hard on other people, and I shouldn't be. They have different tolerances, different things that they can and can't handle. Things are a small thing for my son might be huge for me, and vice versa.
Right. And it looks like Megan said all of the above. And I think to some degree, all of the above is probably appropriate, because I know I've heard all of these and it's like, good vibes only, I think, is hit or miss because it really depends on the context of when it's said. But if I'm telling you I'm having a bad day, I don't want to hear good vibes only. That is the quickest way to get me more angry. So
that's just a weird thing to say in that context.
It is. And it's like, why the fuck would you say that? And the sad fact is that people do say it. When I was doing the research for kind of this topic tonight, I was like, holy shit, that's really that common. So the next question is, and this is for the chat and both of the other guests on the panel, how do you differentiate optimism from invalidation?
I think comparison, personally, if there's a spirit of comparison in whatever is being said, then I think it can be invalidating personally. If it brings a comparison to my situation to somebody else's, or I don't know. It's kind of a weird, kind of a feel thing,
Right. I think optimism is, I guess I do everything where in the moment you're going to feel everything you feel. And then when I feel like you're better, then I'm going to give you some optimism. So I'm trying to get better about when somebody can. So say one of my kids comes to me with something, they come to me, I let them feel it, talk it out, process it, whatever they have to do. And then or maybe later, depending on if it's appropriate, I'll say, okay, do you feel like you learned a lesson in that or something like that where it's optimistic, like what can you learn from this? But in the moment, if you feel like if you're too optimistic, it's going to invalidate whatever they're saying. And I'm not perfect at it. My kids will tell you that, but I do think that um anytime optimism is the first option, it's worse. And I think that ties into in the military, but just in therapy and in other things that I do, I realize that it's easier to get through all the tough stuff first. So I call it breaking you down and building you up, but I'm not really trying to break anybody down, right? So breaking people down and then building them up. So letting you feel in the moment, whatever it is you need to feel, and then afterwards building you up. But if I start off building you up while you're still trying to process, it's actually going to do more harm than good. What nonverbal cues tell you that you have been dismissed?
If you roll your fucking eyes at me, I will lose it. Oh, God.
Yes. Yes. I think rolling eyes, I think sometimes when people do this, unless that's like their thing, I think
I do that, and that is my thing, and I always feel so bad about it because I'll be in a briefing just like sitting there like that, and I feel like I'm making them self-conscious, like, oh, that guy fucking hates me. Oh, he's not about this. It's just like, it's comfortable.
right, right. Just the random says groan grunts or sarcastically. I think that is one. I think the one that I'm really bad about, and it's just because I struggle with eye contact, is if somebody is looking down at their feet. Like I do that because I'm uncomfortable with eye contact. But I think that for some people, that is, I don't really want to hear this, but I'm trying really hard not to roll my eyes. That's crazy is another one. So what you can do if you're listening and you're one of these people on either end, right, is swapping platitudes with validation. So somebody comes to you and they are needing to unload, instead of saying, you'll be fine, you can say, you know what, this is scary, this is intense, this is whatever emotion that is identified, and I'm here with you, or I want to be here with you in the moment, or I'm here to listen. And I think that goes a long way. Um,
Like some people
I
just want to be acknowledged
Right, right. And there are
so they don't
times,
feel crazy.
yes, and there are times where like I'll be talking and nobody's saying, like somebody's not saying something on the other end, and I'm like, are you still there? So like I always try to be like, yeah, no, I hear you. Like just to let them know like I'm still here. I didn't take a nap while you were talking to me. But I do. I think that's exactly it, Selena. So do you either of you have anything to say on that?
I I had a thought just now. My wife, when we got married, or well, a little bit before, what made me know that I was going to marry her actually was I had a really traumatic event happen pre-military. Still not something I would ever talk about really on the internet, just kind of due to the pain factor of it. But she stuck with me through that whole situation, which I wish I could explain more about it or was willing to, but the fact that she was willing to sit through all that with somebody she'd been dating for like 8 months at the time, not even that, was insane. And she handled it so well because she knew there was she could not have a frame of reference for the level of loss that I had just gone through. And she didn't try to, she didn't try to sit there and talk me through it or try to get me through it with her experience or validation. She just sat there and was with me through it. She brought me my favorite thing from Whataburger and just sat. I hadn't left my room in almost 14 days at that point. I hadn't spoken to her, and she brought me a burger and just sat there. And,
Yeah. Food
is what I needed.
food is always a good opener for most people, you know. My daughter's is ice cream. So,
It's nice to have a spouse or partner that doesn't like, well, maybe you should try this or you should do this. And instead they say, what do you need from me? What can I do to help
yes,
you?
yes. My
As that
husband's
more
great
often than
about that.
almost anything else.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My husband's really good about that. My son, too. My son will go, I can't remember what his phrase was. It was, do you need support or do you need support or feedback? I think is what he says. I can't remember now. And I was like, oh my God, I could tell you're the son of somebody who used to be a therapist because that sounds like some therapist shit right there. But yeah, I think having a supportive partner or supportive family around is also, it is a game changer, especially because it makes you feel validated. All right. So why it hurts. And this is basically going to be psychology in plain English. Emotional suppression is something that I'm sure we all do at some point, but toxic positivity can lead us to mask or hide or suppress our emotions. And this is actually linked to higher physiological stress and lower well being. And I think this ties into something I said either last week or the week before, where mental health is health. If you are depressed, you are more likely to get sick. If you are sick, you are more likely to get depressed. And, not always going to happen that way, but it can happen, especially if you're under a lot of stress and you're suppressing emotions. And it has that volcanic effect too, where eventually one day you just blow the fuck up. And this lowers your overall well-being, which just kind of keeps that cycle going and keeps you stuck in that cycle. And I think emotional suppression is probably the thing everybody does when they feel like they are not being heard. I know I shut down completely if I feel like I'm not being heard. If you hate yourself, you won't treat yourself. That's true. That is true. Let's see. If you're sad all the time, you'll think it'll never get better. So then you have the shame spiral, which I kind of feel like all of these can kind of be almost like a ladder linking one to the next. Not always, but that cycle could turn into the shame spiral, which is if I still feel bad, I'm failing at positivity. So my way of dealing with this, if I am just in one of those moods where everybody can just fuck right off, is I have 24 hours to feel whatever it is. If I want to crawl in bed and do nothing for 24 hours, of course, I have that privilege. Not everybody does. So you have to adapt it to your life. And after 24 hours, I have to pull my head out of my ass and I have to be like, you know what? I've processed it all. I had 24 hours to rage out or cry it out or whatever. And today's new and we're going to start again. And I think that has been one of my most effective tools for not suppressing my emotions. Like I'm allowed to feel it. And there are times even where I will tell my husband and my daughter, like, I'm going to be irritable. This is not a you thing. It is all me, but I need to get through it or whatever. And I think, and they both understand that. And I think that ties back into what both of you guys were saying about having a partner who's like, what do you need from me? Or how can I support you? Like, that's where that plays a role. You have to know that I'm being bitchy, but it has nothing to do with you. Sorry, I don't know if I'm hot or cold tonight, so please don't judge me. Then there's attachment and trust. And this ties into people are going to withdraw when their feelings are minimized. So I am going to shut completely down if I feel like I'm not being heard or if I feel like you think I'm being dramatic. And shutting down cycles back into the emotional suppression and the shame spiral. And then you have help seeking. You are not going to want to seek help if you already feel like you're not being heard. And I think we see this in the medical side of things too, not just mental health, but it's going to lead invalidation delays you getting the care you need, right? If you feel like nobody else cares, why the fuck should you care? So it can also worsen outcomes. And I think it can lead to sometimes even self-harming type behaviors or substance use. And that's, you know, why people need to be heard. Let's see.
Like traditional self-harm too. It can
Right.
mean things like staying up too late, getting up too late, not working
Overeating,
out,
not eating, sleeping too much.
overeating,
Yeah.
drinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, because you're absolutely right. If you're sad all the time, you'll think it'll never get better. Bottling emotions is like a pressure cooker. I call it the volcano, same concept. I don't know if that was a good analogy. It was a great analogy. So this is the finish the sentence, and you can just type it in the chat. So when I hear just be positive, I usually feel resentment. When I hear just be positive, I usually feel resentment. Okay.
I don't know why I just typed that instead of just saying it.
Oh, you're fine. Either way is fine. I'm trying to keep the chat going, so it doesn't hurt to double on that. So if I feel upset, I'm trying to be positive. When I hear just be positive, I usually feel I'm upset. Okay. Do you have, if you're comfortable sharing, of course, has anyone ever had a moment or a situation where validation unlocked progress more than reassurance? So when you're experiencing that stress or whatever, and somebody's hearing you and validating your emotions, do you feel like that's more progressive for you, or has it been more progressive for you than reassurance itself?
Much more, because I work myself into a frenzy all the time about whether or not I'm reacting in a normal way to things, because I feel like I'm overreacting to everything. But it really helps me when somebody will sit down and say, no, hey, you actually should be kind of pissed off about that. Like that's not a good thing.
Right.
I'm mad about like everything all the time. I don't know if you can tell from my content.
Oh, I
but,
get
yeah.
mad and I get sad, and I get so mad that I'm sad. So it's totally, you know, I want validation. I think validation does make more sense than reassurance. Reassurance is good, but I think if you get validation the correct way, that is the reassurance. So there's that. Do you think there's a line between resilience building and bypassing? I think there's a line between resilience building and bypassing. I think that bypassing is basically like moving on. And I think it's not helpful.
Bypassing implies like ignoring the thing. Resiliency implies building up a resistance to it. So being able to inoculate yourself to stress or whatever that situation is, I want to become better than it, not necessarily just like forget about it and try to avoid it from now on, you know?
Right. Because that way, if I accidentally deleted my notes again, then at least I would have something to. All right. So where it shows up. So where toxic positivity can show up is work, family. Where it shows up is work, family, faith and spiritual spaces, recovery spaces, and social media. And I've seen this also in the MLM industry, and I'm not going to discuss MLMs because I know people feel some type of way either way about it, but I have seen toxic positivity in that space. And I think that can be detrimental, which I guess technically that would count as work, but
I was just going to say an MLM will talk you into being so insufferable about a thing that you lose family and friends over it. So yeah, I mean, they'll say, just keep going and eventually you'll get sales. No, you'll just lose everybody.
Yeah, I got sucked into the MLM toxic positivity cycle once upon a time. So, I totally get it. So work, toxic productivity, which is, oh my God, I hate this because I really do treat my staff like family. And so like if they come to me and they need a mental health day or whatever, I'll give it to them. And sometimes if they have like sick time or whatever and they want to cash it out, like I'll do that. So I hate that because my staff really is like my family, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do as much as I do, right? But when you work at a place like Target or Walmart and they're like, we're a family, that is toxic positivity. Like, oh, you guys did such a great job and we made so much money. Here's a pizza party. That is toxic positivity to me. Um, or mandatory fun day,
Pizza
right?
party goes crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Or it would be like, you guys got all of your whatever dumb shit you had to do online in the military done faster than any other unit. You get to go home at 4 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock on Friday. You guys are family. Let's do mandatory fun day. Like that kind of stuff to me is toxic positivity. And then the other thing is where it's like you're not allowed to have negative feelings about anything or anyone or any experience at work. I think that's where it can be toxic, or toxic productivity, which ties kind of back into the MLM thing. I think sometimes we get too caught up in a numbers game with jobs or employers or wherever, and that's how that happens. Um, then family is actually probably some of the worst offenders with this. Don't cry. We don't talk about that. We don't air out our dirty laundry. Suck it up. I'm sure you guys have some examples too. Yeah, yeah. Nobody else needs to know. Um,
I feel like one of the big ones I've experienced, I have a lot of fucked up family members and a lot of family members that I've cut off because they've done horrible things to me. And my
right,
dad is one of those people who will be like, well, that's your uncle. Like completely invalidating what they've done to me and how they make me feel. They're like, well, that's still your family. Okay, well, my family shouldn't have been treating me the way that they did. Why don't you go to them? Why are you coming to me for setting a boundary?
right, right. And I think too, the whole blood is thicker than water thing, I don't believe in that. I was raised on that, but I don't believe in that. And the reason is because I have met friends that are more family than my family. And I have met family that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And I think we all have family issues to a degree, right? But I think that the whole, oh, that's your family, you can't just cut them off. Like, who the fuck says I can't? If it's not healthy for me, I don't fucking need them. I wish my dad would have stuck up for me and put me first. Yeah, you know what? My kids, my oldest boys can actually probably relate to that sentiment. And they all do stuff now, so they're not here. But, I think that's actually so common and it sucks. I'm sorry. I think, you know what though, and I know that this is slightly off topic, okay, but I think like those experiences are what give us like our snarky sense of humor, like, or our morbid sense of humor. Like that's how we can joke about shit that actually hurts, because if you don't laugh through the pain, you're gonna cry. And sometimes you need to cry, but sometimes you just need to find a way to cope with it. And I think dark humor is the way to cope with it.
I
Yeah,
agree.
Jamie, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Jamie, you made a great argument against toxic positivity right there. I think that in the military, the way that we get through all these horrible situations is dark humor. We've all heard that so many times. We don't get through it by being super positive, happy-go-lucky. We get through it by being hard. There's resiliency doesn't necessarily mean positivity.
Right, right,
I agree. And it's also like, yeah, it's going through stuff like that has taught me how to use, humor and dark humor to cope. But it's also taught me what kind of parent I don't want to be like and what kind of parent I do want to be like. And I remember talking to my therapist when I first started going to therapy, and I was talking about how, like, growing up, I was scared of everything, and still as an adult, there's so many experiences I'll never have because my anxiety is so bad. I'm scared of everything. And part of that is because of my childhood. And I was talking to my therapist how my son, he is getting very brave because he's also scared of everything, but he's getting braver and braver. And my therapist said, well, that's because I made a safe space for him. And I didn't have someone make that for me. And that's why he and I are very different.
right. And I think that actually is going to tie right into kind of the next topic. And I just want to clarify before I go into it. I will never criticize anybody's faith. So, um, but I will talk about things that are done in the faith and spiritual community. And this is all of them, not just Christianity or one specific thing, that do play a role on invalidating things. And I think faith and spiritual spaces do tend to kind of invalidate people's feelings at times, not all the time, but sometimes, right? We were taught that we needed to suffer to go through things. I know I had the story of Job. Well, Job went through this and he persevered. Well, like most of us have had to do that at some point in our life. That doesn't mean like we want to hear that this is normal. Like in that moment, we want to hear like, I'm so sorry you're going through this, not like, oh, it's just part of the process, you know? And I think sometimes lack of faith can also play a role in toxic positivity. And then over spiritualizing pain. So it's like, I'm going to pray it away. And I believe in prayer and I believe in faith. And I believe that manifesting, or however you spiritually want to call it, and bringing things into your life can be a good thing. And I think that's what words do have power. So I do think that there is some semblance in not always being Squidward, and sometimes just being SpongeBob, but we can't always be SpongeBob. And I know I'm using a cartoon reference, but that's the way that I view like happy and grouchy. And so I think sometimes, you know, SpongeBob comes to the scene and he's like, you know, let's have fun. I ripped my pants or whatever. And Squidward is like, oh, not again. Like we're the Squidward in that moment where it's like, that's not what I want to hear right now. And I think that's something that I think can get a little bit misunderstood or invalidated in the spiritual spaces. And then even in recovery spaces, right? And I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago about how like the recovery spaces can sometimes be really toxic. Especially because you have people that are like, I am totally sober. I don't have to take Suboxone, you know? And it's like, okay, but if people are functioning, who the fuck cares how you got there? Like, if they're not committing crimes and they're not doing drugs and we've saved their life and they're clean and sober and they're being productive, like, we don't need to be toxic and be like, I'm better than you or one-upping each other. And I think that sometimes it's good to have gratitude while we're healing from anything. It's good to have gratitude in general, but I think it's okay to not always be grateful. There's going to be times in our lives where the only good thing we might have to say that day is, well, I'm 6 feet above the dirt.
One of the most toxic things I see in Christianity, because I'm a huge Christian. You know, Jesus died for me on the cross. But one of the most toxic things I see in Christianity is you don't need to take medicine, you need to give it to God. And it's like, okay, when I have the flu, I don't just give it to God, I take medicine. Like my brain has something wrong with it and I need medicine to function. And people act like if you take medicine and then you don't trust Christ. And it's like, no, I trust God, but I also need to take care of myself. God made me this way, literally.
Right. And I think that same thing could also go in the recovery space. You know, oh, well, if you just work hard enough. And I think in a way that what they both kind of have in common is some people, again, I don't want to overgeneralize, some people always feel like no matter what they do, it's never enough. And I think we already struggle with that in secular spaces. So it's really hard to struggle with that in a spiritual space as well, or a recovery space. And then I think social media, like I know that we're in hustle culture, which is a huge contributor to toxic positivity. But I also think, like, again, this ties back to what we said a couple weeks ago, where you're just seeing, most of the time, you're seeing people's best lives. Like, I know that some of us might get on here and be like, I'm having a shit day, like once in a while. But I know for myself, if I've gotten on TikTok to even address something because I'm in that kind of mood, it took me a lot to even come into social media and say it, because I'm already, you know, in such a place that I don't give a fuck. I'm going to share it with somebody and then somebody can relate to me. But more often than not, you're going to see my good videos, my positive videos, my happy videos, my dog videos. You're not going to see, you know, oh, this person pissed me off today. You know, well, you might hear me bitch about my mailman regularly because he fucking hates our guts, but that's it. That's it. I promise.
We forget that social media is not real. Social media it's fake. It's not real. This is not our whole lives. This is literally just 10-second glimpses.
Yeah.
But we look at these people's, we look at their profiles, we look at their videos, we look at their lives, and we think, why can't I have it that good?
It's the aesthetic. I feel like I've been so happy to see lately. There's a lot of people that'll be like, "Can you just show me the home of a normal person and not an influencer?" Yeah, me. I have stains in my carpet. I have you know, cabinets that need replaced. I have walls that need repainted. Yeah, those
But
are
see,
my
then if you show
people.
like a stain on the wall, somebody makes like a CPS report anonymously, and it's like, holy shit, dude. Like,
Yeah.
sorry I didn't do all of my dishes right now. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah, God forbid. You know, and I mean, and then there are I sometimes actually will be like watching some of these people and be like, how do they have like no shame? Like none at all. You have literal cockroaches. Like, and it's one thing if you're doing awareness, like, hey, I moved into this place and I have a slumlord. It's another when you're like, you know, come cook with me. And, you know, there's roaches crawling off this dirty ass stove, you know, and I'm not even one to really judge people's dirty houses. I've went into some really scary places as a therapist, and sometimes we had to go out to people's homes. And you know, I was raised in a home with a mother who collects lots of things, and that's like the most I'm gonna say, but I'm sure you guys get it. And um, so I am not gonna judge based off of that, but I do think that most people are judging people based on, you know, I made it to $1 million in 3 months on YouTube or whatever. And it's like, that's the exception. That's not the reality. And I think when you tell people, and I'm not saying you can't tell people they can do something and they can't make it happen, but it's still the exception and not reality. I will never piss on someone's dreams if they think they can do something. I'm always going to be that supportive hype man for people, but I'm also not going to try to convince people that, um, you know, my life is perfect. It's definitely not.
The amount of craziness that has to go into social media for me, if I wasn't in the position that I'm in where I have, you know, 100% permanent and total disability, I couldn't fucking go work a regular job if I wanted to. There's not a chance that I could hold down employment. So I'm able to do this because I have that time, but I'm only at 5,000 followers on TikTok alone right now, and I have
Yeah.
too much time. I cannot get to all the comments and all the interactions and messages. I'm only at 5,000. When
Right.
you're up at 30, 40, 50, it's way worse. I've been there. Like it's
Don't worry, most
tough.
of them are bots.
Like, well, yeah, and fuck, that's hard to get through too, you know?
Yeah, I've gotten like 12 bot alerts on one post today. So, like, Jesus Christ, leave me alone. But yeah, and I think that too. And I think even when you like I think about how so I just batch filmed before coming on here, right? And then I was trying to prep some videos to just auto publish while we were on the live and I didn't get to it, but um I go in and I try to edit and I try to have ChatGPT give me some good hashtags for each video, and I try to layer keywords in my video and stuff like that, and it's like that could take a lot of work. So even when we do see these people who are successful, Most of them didn't get there overnight, and if they did, they were probably a product of the pandemic. And I'm not being an asshole, but it's true because a lot of people blew up then. But also, you have the fact that it's like a snowball. Once you get that ball rolling, if you're consistent, it's gonna get better. So yeah, now they're they're we're getting the aesthetic side, and I really hope that, like, if I ever get to a place where I super huge, that I don't forget that once upon a time I was just a normal person too. Like I want to stay normal. I want to stay a normal person because I don't want to be that person that's like encouraging people to live this life that's not really there. Now, I'm all about being delusional. I am planning my move, okay? I am planning my move with my TikTok money, and I will be delusional about that because it's going to happen, but I never want to forget that, like, you can't just manifest harder or just have faith. Like, you have to put in the work too. And I think people that go ahead.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When you look at a successful social media person, they all have like multiple thousand videos. You know, that you
Hmm.
cannot, unless you have an editor and you're blowing money on that, like you are putting in work. It is a full
Right.
time commitment nowadays.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not good for your mental health, I don't think, for most people, especially if they're trying to launch that while they're working and dealing with
Right.
so much else.
Right. And I think
It's
too, it's becoming so, there's so many people that want to do it. So now you're getting, it's like, okay, I feel like we go through cycles, right? So I feel like in the 2010s, MLMs were like all the rave. Then for a while, it was master resell rights. Then, but it was always hustle culture, hustle, 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 right? And then it was like Amazon storefront. And now we're on TikTok shop affiliate. And I say that as somebody who's a TikTok shop affiliate. And like, I keep it realistic. There are days where I'm going to make zero, and there are days where I might make 30 bucks or whatever. And I think that we feed into these cycles, and I think in a way we feed the machine of the toxicity. All right.
exactly why I separated it out because I didn't want to have like I didn't want to be working so hard to push TikTok shop stuff and then
Mhm.
have that on my main page, taking away from the energy I can put into that. I have the energy, but then I'm putting it on that same page. People have to get through all of it. And just, I didn't. Yeah,
I think once you build
it's
an
tough.
audience, though, people are going to follow you everywhere. And so I really do. Like, if I really like somebody, I will go follow them on all their platforms. TikTok's the only one where I'm like a little different because I try to actually follow smaller people back. So if my following starts getting too close, well, I think right now I'm at 6,800. But if I start getting too close to 10,000, then I'm gonna try to follow smaller creators and follow those other larger people, places like YouTube or whatever. But yeah, so we're gonna do another audience poll. So I'm gonna ask the questions and you guys are gonna drop your answer in the chat. I'll give you letters so you don't have to type it out because I'm lazy and I don't expect you guys to type out full sentences. So the question is, where do you feel most silenced? You have A is work, B is family, C is community or faith, D is online, E is in healthcare. And I guess F would be all the above.
It used to be family, but I don't talk to any of them anymore.
Hmm. I think mine was work. And actually, weirdly enough, I enjoyed my minimum wage jobs more than I did my career as far as workplace. I loved working with clients, but like workplace bullshit, I hated that. But when I worked like retail and stuff, I always felt like it's hustle, hustle, hustle. If you have a problem, well, find a way to work around it. It's like, I'm not in the army anymore. I'm not doing this no fail mission bullshit. I'm not going to get hemmed up and have to do push-ups if I don't get this done. Like, I'm going home at the end of the day. So I think for me, mine was work, but I think more recently, I would say actually that it's probably healthcare. Um, I feel like they like to gaslight a lot. Like, oh, it's not that serious.
I think mine's definitely still work just because that's the one environment where I feel like there are like serious penalties for any like social misdemeanor, right? If you say the wrong thing in an office, you are fired, you're done, you'll never get a job again. That's why I could
TikTok will
never
do
go
that to
work
you
in a regular
nowadays.
environment. Well, they can try, but that's the cool thing about TikTok is I can just keep coming back.
Bye,
I've done it
Selena.
before, I'll do it again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's probably fair. And I think I think in some ways, honestly, social media can silence people because God forbid you have a dissenting opinion or a hot take, and I think that is bullshit. Like, I don't know. I really enjoy people for who they are. We don't all have to agree. There's absolutely disgusting people, and that doesn't mean I like them, but it also doesn't mean I'm going to bash them into the ground. Andrew, welcome in. I don't know. I tried to send you an invite. Hopefully that worked. All right. So, um, okay. So I think really kind of the key takeaway from this topic on where it shows up, toxic positivity is going to be, we need to honor people's real feelings first. Thank you so much for the heart me. And we need to find solutions second. We don't want platitudes. We want to use reflective language. We want to use, in the therapy world, we called it unconditional regard. But in the layman's term, that's literally just honoring their feelings by letting them feel first. And then, do you want support or feedback? And then you determine which one of those, if solutions are appropriate at that time. All right. Oh, look, I'm keeping right on track. Like I have it to 45 to 60 minutes, 60 to 75 minutes. So we're actually we're a little ahead of schedule. So I'm kind of proud of that right now. Let me change the backdrop again. Okay. So culture, identity, and power. And so toxic positivity in gendered expectations, radicalized expectations, military veteran culture, and mental health stigma. That's what we're going to cover right now. Thank you so much for those populars, Andrew. So gendered expectations. I think the key with this is something we talked about before where, men's mental health can slip through the cracks because a lot of men are taught that crying is for weak people, basically. So I'm going to let the guys comment on that. We'll start with Vet's inner voice.
Hey, first off, I've cried in front of my wife a ton of times, especially lately, and I still, get hugs and kisses. So it's okay to show your feelings. God, it's my thing is I've always kind of been. I was born close enough to 9/11 that I remember it, and that was a really formative thing for me. And I was kind of like put on this path of being, the warrior, go seek retribution or whatever that we all kind of felt after that. And I never stopped to allow myself to feel anything because I felt that if I was feeling something, I was wasting time that I could be out there hunting. I went into law enforcement right after high school, went into the military. Like I have been a hunter of bad dudes forever. And until I got out, I was not really willing to sit down and say, hey, I need to feel and process all of this, the things that I've done. And, granted, the things that I did on the law enforcement side physically were a lot worse and more kinetic than the military because of what I did in the military. But the things I saw in the military on such a scale were so psychologically scarring that it completely changed who I am as a human being.
Right.
So I've had to reframe how I think about trauma and emotion and expression. I'm exploring like physical touch as like an expression of, I don't know, it's a weird thing, like nerve stimulation and stuff to try to like feel. I'm trying to find a way to feel and allow myself that, but I can't because I was never the entire formative time of my life allowed to feel those things or explore them.
Right. Right. Wolf says emotions are for when there is time, is what I'd sum it up to be, and there never seems to be time. I think that's a pretty fair take. All right, we're at 50% of the live goal. Thank you guys. Yeah, I think that's a fair take. Inner thought poet, do you have any commentary to add to that?
I know for me, like a lot of the things like growing up was boys don't cry. So I definitely agree. Just like not being able to feel or well, being able to feel but not really being able to acknowledge your feelings or understand like where they come from is a big thing for men specifically. Not really understanding
Right.
their feelings initially anyway.
Right. Right. And I think that men are also kind of taught to be more protectors. So even if they're not taught that crying is weak, sometimes they're taught that they have to be strong. And that's basically the same thing when you really think about it. Andrew, any thoughts?
Yes, hi. I definitely relate to everything that was said. And yeah, there's always been this stigma around mental health in general, but especially when it comes to men's mental health. We're basically taught to not show emotions and just like, suck it up and we're conditioned to man up and everything, but mental health affects everyone. And I think we're doing better. I think a lot of work has already been done. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, but mental health affects everyone. And if you want to cry or if you have a moment, that's okay. That doesn't mean you're weak at all, just like Vet was saying. And yeah, I think we need to do a little better when it comes to men's mental health.
I think so too. And I think we're making progress, but I definitely feel like it is at a snail's pace. Identity or role makes honest emotion the hardest for you to show. Share if you're comfortable. You can drop it in the chat, or if one of the people on the panel wants to share.
Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry. What identity or role makes honest emotion hardest for you to show? And then we just added Wolf onto the panel. So any of you guys can answer that. What identity or role makes honest emotion hardest for you to show?
Hold on. I don't know. Terrible timing for the 2 seconds.
No worries.
So this is just, I don't know if this is gonna be like an unpopular thing to say. Like I feel that two ways about the gendered expectations of feelings, especially when it comes to men, right? Like one, as someone that just seems to have random bouts of like crying, because like I'll hear an insurance commercial and it just like triggers me on like the drive down somewhere. I'm like, where the hell did that come from? But also the need, I think there is a valid need to be able to save emotion. Like it's when I put in the chat, like emotions are for when there is time and there's never time. Like I think there's validity into the skill or the necessity of being able to compartmentalize for the moment and through the crisis of things. And this might not to branch off on something, but I do get sometimes worried on a more global scale that like moving away from that ability is going to lead to maybe like it is leading to in a lot of sense like the feminization of a lot of men these days because of like the over emotionalization of things sometimes. Like, and I think that there's valid masculine reasons to be able to control your emotions and find it. And I think the problem is we're taught that more than what to do when there is time to address it. And I do, like that's one of the things I'm trying to find balance with my son is be like, hey, like you need to be strong now, but you do need to find times to express it at the same time. And I think sometimes it's leaning too much the other way. So
Okay, so you
that
think it
makes
should be
sense.
more balanced? Am I kind of understanding that correctly?
I think that there's a balance. I think there's a validity and a reason why men specifically um, are raised that way. Like you can say traditionally or culturally or what have you. But I think that like in a crisis, nobody wants to turn to the person that's crying in the corner, right?
Right. Right.
Like, and that person in the corner. And I'm not saying that their emotions aren't valid or whatever else, but like that's not helpful in that moment, right? And I think
Right.
people that and men, like have realized that, and I think that there's because throughout history we've had more crises like the saber-toothed tiger trying to eat us than than someone saying mean stuff on the internet, right? So
Right.
and so I think that's why like it's ingrained that way. Is like you need to be strong now. The problem is I don't think the figuring out the time to be able to be like, hey man, I was scared when that saber-tooth tiger, and the person was like, yeah, I was scared too. Yeah, like
Right.
that stuff doesn't really happen these days, and I think that's probably the bigger problem.
I and I
So
don't I don't think that's really a hot take. I think it's because I think the biggest thing really that we're touching on is the appropriateness of the response. So, and I think it could I don't know. I don't think it's a totally hot take, but we welcome dissenting opinions here as long as they're respectful anyway. So, I think
we
you
get taught
present a very
to
fair. Go ahead.
so we get taught to like feel and acknowledge and see the emotion, right? But then we never get taught how to really process it or work through it. Like how do you cope with the things that you saw, did, whatever in that crisis? That's what we
Right.
get skipped on.
Right. And I do think it's important to teach our children, especially because Wolf is talking about his son. I do think it's important to teach your children that the response might not always be. I'm trying to think of how to word it. Sometimes the appropriate response is going to be we're going to act now and feel the emotions later. I think is where I'm really trying to go with that. Um, because I agree we don't want to curl up in a ball and cry if we're getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, but but we definitely can do it after we run. And I think actually it's really interesting when you think about it, because one of the things that I told my daughter before she was in online school was, they do school shooter drills now. And I remember telling her, no matter how scared you are and no matter how much you want to cry, you have to hold in whatever noises your body wants to make until it is safe. And I remember,
Watch
like,
the horror movies where they're hiding in the closet.
right, right. As long as it's not the people that are like, let's look under this log where the crazy clown is or something. But, and I think if I understand correctly, that's kind of what Wolf was trying to say, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's kind of it. Like it's just that like I do think that there's validity into the emotional suppression at the correct times, and I think that part is just the thing that gets implemented more often, or as the most important thing for whatever reason. And I said like the dissenting part is that like I I feel and I think just like looking at society and looking at people and like talking to people, um, that men are being in some ways effeminized by like like feelings and like like the over validation of feelings. Like one of the things I read recently is that in a lot of ways, children, Gen Z, whatever, like people growing up these days are the most counseled and therapied generation of people ever. But they also have like the highest depression rates and mental illness rates of all time. And it's almost because like the again, not to belittle, but like anybody that has mental trauma, because I certainly do. Um,
but sometimes they're forgetting to tell people to like shut up. That's not a problem. That's not a real. Like that's not being said sometimes, and not like it's not just something. It's
Right.
just a thought that I've had, and those are just something that I kind of worry about when it comes to like men's mental health. Is like, hey, like you do need to be able to address it, and you need to find those ways. You need to find those ways of proper expression at the right time, but also not everything is a problem. And there's appropriate times for that, and that's kind of my moreover point about stuff. And maybe that's not what that's exactly about, but it is something
No,
that I
I
think
think
about.
it ties in though, because I do think it ties in because it ties in, we're discussing toxic positivity, and I do think it does tie in with that. I think that unfortunately you're right about the depression rates of the younger generation and stuff like that, but I also think that one of the issues is they're not I can't speak for everybody, but I will say I'm Gen X till I die because I refuse to be a millennial. I'm on the cusp, so I guess technically I'm a zennial. But I grew up in a home where if you guys have been seeing any of the stuff on James Dobson lately, like that with I'm so happy my mom was inconsistent with his teachings, but a lot of people in my generation were taught like, you're going to have your mouth washed out with soap, and I think it led to issues with people in my generation parenting differently, but not necessarily in a way that's conducive to their children. And so, in a way, the cycle is getting worse and worse. And I think you also have to take technology, right? So, technology is advancing so rapidly that, when I was in high school, pagers were a thing. Now you see kids with cell phones at like 8 years old. And now you almost need them to have a cell phone in a school because of issues that are going on in the schools. So, but I also think we see a lot, and I want to say this delicately because I really want to try not to piss people off, but we see a lot of tablet kids. And I mean, think about what our mind does when we doom scroll. It is so easy to become radicalized if you watch enough of the right videos on an algorithm. It is so easy to get depressed if you watch enough of the right videos on the algorithm. And you got to think like this is getting ingrained in their heads at young ages. They're not being necessarily supervised properly. And I think that is leading to those things. And so I do think it does tie into toxic positivity because you have these parents who are like, that's not a real issue. And there are things that are not real issues. I will 100% say that, having a meltdown because you have a test tomorrow at school is very minuscule compared to witnessing a traumatic car accident on the way to school and now being afraid to get in the car. I think there's differences in though. We'll see you later, Vet Center Voice. Thanks for hopping on with us tonight. So
Thank you.
yeah. So I think that you're not totally I don't think you're wrong. I think we agree in more ways than we would disagree on what you're saying, I guess is what I'm trying to spit out. I'm getting used to still doing live, so sometimes I struggle with words. I'm a writer, I'm a yapper, but I'm a writer, not an actual speaker. So one of the things, so moving on to the next kind of part of what we're talking about, if I can change my board here, is a boundary script. And I really, really like this. And this is just kind of as it relates to toxic positivity. And that's when someone comes to you, when you're saying, I need to vent, and they're like, oh, well, it could be worse. Or, oh my God, the one I hear all the time is, welcome to my world. Like, no, I don't want to be in your fucking world. Fuck off with that shit, right? So I value positivity, but I am not skipping the hard part. Please hear me out before we start looking for silver linings. And I don't think that welcome to my world is really a silver lining. It's more of a backhanded silver lining, but it's like, I want to be able to freely express myself at the same time and be heard. I don't need you to necessarily try to coddle me, but I need to be heard. You're a yapper like me, yeah. Well, that's because we're related. It's dismissive of the issue. It is. It is very dismissive of the issue. All right, so hot seat Q&A. This is the part, it's not going to be a free for all, but this is the part that I wanted to change, that I felt like I could do more structure with from the first time we did this live. So, did I skip over a whole part? I did. Okay, but it's a wrap up, so I'll go over that really quick. So social media and good vibes only. Algorithms reward tidy highs and not messy middles, so that's one of the reasons why it is so easy. There's two things I've noticed in the algorithm, especially with TikTok, right? You have people hate watch. It's like trash television, and I'm guilty. Like, I'm not going to deny that shit. But they also reward people that are showing off their $1 million mansions, because that's what everybody wants, right? They see that dream. But also performative positivity and is not the same as grounded hope, right? And I think performative positivity and virtue signaling could honestly be in the same category, because to me it's fucking relative. And then comment moderation. We can stop platitude dog piles. And I've seen this where somebody comes to the internet and, you know, they have nobody and they're just like, I want to tell my community on here that I'm having this or that. And it's like, well, I'm going to pray for you. Sometimes they just want to hear, I hear you, I see you, I care, not I'm going to pray for you. And I'm not trying to take away from people who are spiritual that way, but sometimes it's not really what they're looking for in that moment. When you post honestly, when you post honestly and authentically, what happens the most? This is another poll. So we have A, support, B, silence, C, positivity pushback, or D, mix. So when you're posting authentically or honestly, what happens the most?
I don't think I've authentic.
I think for me, I've had a mix. Sometimes I get crickets. Sometimes I get support. Sometimes I get, you got this, you know, and it's like, no, I don't got this. That's why I'm fucking bitching about it. Let's see. And then, all right. So next is from bypass to balance hope. Five swaps to teach and practice. And these are things that you can use with your kids or with other people. Andrew, you might be somewhat familiar with these. I don't post what I'd probably want to because I wouldn't want to watch it. You know, you'd be amazed. You would be amazed. There are things that I post that I wouldn't want to watch myself, but those videos are the ones that always seem to do the best. So you would be amazed. So validating before reframing. So instead of saying this is hard, or if you're hearing this is hard from somebody, you can actually reframe it as, and we can take the next step together, meaning like, I hear you, I see you, I'm going to sit with you through this. Curiosity over cure, which is tell me more about what the day felt like. Tell me more about how that made you feel, that you're so amped up or so upset or so, you know, whatever emotion. I always say fill in the blank with whatever emotion's going on at the time. And then you want to ask, do you want support or do you want feedback? I really love that. My son started doing that and I just really like it. Awesome. So do you want ideas or do you need me to just listen? Welcome in, Jackie. And then you have the name the mixed bag. Name the emotions or combination of emotions that are happening. I am so sorry. There must be a dog or something on TV. I apologize. And then you have name the mixed bag. I can be grateful and overwhelmed, or I can be angry and frustrated, or something like that. Ellie, please be quiet. And then you have the time anchor hope. Right now is rough. So let's just get through the next minute, next 10 minutes, next hour, whatever it is that they might need. If you had to pick a sentence to kind of reassure or validate somebody's emotions, and you want to share that in the comments, I would love to hear them. Sometimes therapist Jamie gets so busy being, a former therapist Jamie gets so busy putting the therapist hat on that I forget to ask other people what their ideas are. And so I think we can all kind of learn from each other. And if you don't want to share, that's okay too. I'm going to go into the hot seat Q&A. And this is just a couple of questions I thought of, but if you guys have questions that I didn't have an example for, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll help you. But it's, how do I respond when my boss says no negativity? I'm on board with solutions. I need space to describe the problem first so the solution fits. Or I'm on board, do you have any ideas or something like that? Like, don't just tell me no negativity. That and honestly, in the workplace, that used to be my biggest frustration. Don't tell me I have to fix it if you're not going to come to the table with the solution, or listen to me if I'm offering a solution. How do I correct a loved one who's using platitudes? I know you want to help when you say just be positive. I feel like you're dismissing me. Could you ask me what I need first? Solution focused. Yes, solution focused is, I like person-centered and solution-focused. So it's meet me where I'm at, but also come to me with a solution. Help me solve this problem, or help me figure out how I can solve my own problem, right? Ellie, please stop. She just told me no. Isn't optimism healthy? Realistic optimism acknowledges pain and agency, but toxic positivity is denying or invalidating your pain. What if I'm the one doing it? And this kind of goes back to what Selena was saying earlier. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. Sometimes we are the toxic positive one. Sometimes we're like smiling through, like, oh yeah, I feel people give platitudes when they have no reasonable way to help, but they are expressing empathy. I think that's fair. And I think it's fair, but I also think if somebody's able to say, hey, I really appreciate that you're trying to help me find the silver lining, but can we get through this first? That would work too. But sometimes people just in the moment, I know I get deer in the headlights. Like if I'm in a crisis, and I can handle crisis pretty well. I've been doing it a long time, my entire life, I swear. But sometimes in that moment, I'm just at such a loss for words that I don't know what else to say. And I think that's fair. I think that sometimes we do want to be empathetic so much that we just blurt the first thing that comes to mind, and we're not trying to be insulting about it. And then what is something that you would want people to remember or think about when they're tempted to cheer up somebody in pain?
I would just say that to be very aware of your words and toxic positivity, of course, because, and I agree with what Wolf said in the chat. I think that's fair. It's just to, not deny the reality of the situation or how somebody is feeling. And of course, you can be positive. Like, I think I have a mostly sunny disposition in life, and especially nowadays because it's 2025 and we live in a interesting world. But to realize, and be pragmatic about the situation. So this is what it is. This is how I'm feeling about it, and either I want to sit and stew in those feelings, and I want to feel angry, I want to feel sad, depressed, whatever. So let me do that, and then move on from it. And I do want to stay focused on the solution and focus on how to fix it, and when I was younger, I would just complain and I would just catastrophize everything. But now I want to be like, okay, well, how do we solve this? How do we fix this?
Right. I can relate to that. When I was younger, I was Chicken Little. The sky was falling constantly. I was Chicken Little. Wolf says that being present and silent is powerful. And I do. I think it is. I think that is extremely powerful. I think, like, if you have somebody who's really truly in crisis and you're sitting with them in that moment and they feel like you're the only person in their court, that has a lot of power to it. because it's like, oh my God, somebody does care, and they care, more than I might be able to care in this moment. So I think that is the last little bit. So now I'm going to go into wrap up. We can still do questions when I get all completely done, but I like to do the wrap up. So the key takeaways really of everything that we've discussed tonight is feelings aren't a problem and they aren't the problem. Loneliness with feelings is. So if you have feelings and you feel like you have nobody you can count on, that's going to be the issue. You want to validate first and problem solve, but you want to problem solve with consent. And this comes back to, do you need support or do you want feedback? Hope does not equate to denial. It's honesty plus action that's really going to show somebody that you care, right? And I think that's it as far as the takeaways. So for those of you who are new here, hi, I'm Jamie. I always do one final little reintroduction. If you don't know me, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in Christian counseling of substance abuse and addictive disorders. I completed my internship for my license at Arizona State Prison. I worked with GP and sex offenders. I worked at the prison for about 2 years. I stayed in the mental health field for about 4 years, had a midlife crisis and decided to write full time, but I'm extremely passionate about mental health, psychology, recovery, and all of those things, a lot of social things. And so a lot of things that I write about have to do with mental health, recovery, social justice, like justice reform type of stuff, addiction, recovery, whatever. And I started just kind of inadvertently wanting to do these because I hate going live by myself, right? But now I'm getting used to it. And we had a really good response to the first time. So this is the new every Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Arizona time. We hop on here and talk mental health. And the topic this week was actually my 13-year-old daughter picked this topic and she said we should talk about toxic positivity. I said, you're in. So if you have a topic idea for one of these Sunday night chats, please send it to me. I will make an agenda just like I did tonight so that we can talk about it. And I'm really glad that you enjoyed this, Wolf, and I'm really glad you were here. And how I run this is anybody's welcome on the panel as long as they're respectful. You don't have to agree with us, and we can even debate to a certain degree, but I like to keep it drama free. Nobody's required to talk if they don't want to. People can share in the chat, whatever. And then because this is something that I really like doing, I do post this over on my YouTube channel under podcasts. So if you ever are on here and you don't want your voice on, or you don't want your screen name on, or anything like that, you have to let me know. It usually takes me 2 days to get the podcast up, so that I can blur out your details or change your voice or whatever. And because this is an 18 and up podcast, like I'm not making money off of it. I promise you guys, because we do talk about sensitive topics, but I promise if I become like some weird TikTok millionaire from this live, I'll hook y'all up for participating. Okay. So pretty much that's what brought me to do these. So every week, 4:30 p.m., you're welcome. I usually start posting on Friday and Saturday what the topic is, my live, and then give you a chance, and you can register as a guest, or you can register as somebody who's just going to watch the live. And that way it'll send your phone a reminder or add it to your calendar if you want to join in. I want to go over a couple of resources too, because this is mental health and I just feel an obligation where if I'm going to talk about it, I need to also make sure that I'm providing people with resources for more information. So the first thing is if you want to learn more information about any of the things that we talk about, I try to find non-paywalled sources. So you have the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and this is about labeling emotions and outcomes. They have education and workplace materials. This might be something helpful for you, Andrew, since you're still in the field. Then we have the Greater Good Science Center out of UC Berkeley on toxic positivity and emotional validation. You have the APA Dictionary of Psychology and the National Institute of Mental Health. That's where you can find sources for any of the things that we talked about tonight. And then Finally, last but not least, this is the most important part. If you find yourself in a crisis or you know somebody who's in crisis and you are in the US or US territories, and I believe possibly Canada, this works too, 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is 24/7. Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm so excited to hear that. And yeah, it is the same in Canada. I'm looking at my own notes and saying, I think it's the same in Canada. And then if you're international and you're not in any of these places, you can go to findahelpline.com. findahelpline.com. Thank you so much, everybody who joined me for this live. I hope you guys all have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next Sunday at 4:30 p.m.